You're listening to the Late Night Football Show with your host, Rohit Singh. That's me. On this show, we talk about some of the most seriously silly topics from the world of football for your entertainment and enjoyment. Please remember that the show is BYOL. Bring your own laughs, since we don't have the budget for a studio audience. Happy listening. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Late Night Football. It's time for Unlucky, episode number 13, maybe. And we have two important pieces of news to discuss from the week today. So, let's get right into it. For those of you who were living under a rock these last few days, you might not know, but for everyone else, you probably do. Manchester City have been cleared by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or CAS, of any wrongdoing with respect to UEFA's financial fair play rules. Now, if you'll recall, Manchester City were banned for 2 years from the UEFA Champions League earlier this season for breaching fair play rules for the period from 2013 to 2018. But that has now been lifted, meaning they will play in the tournament next season. Now, there's been many debates on both sides all across social media, comment sections on articles, TV shows, former players, current players. So I'm going to add my voice to this as well, because why not? So I'm not going to pretend to be a neutral here, and I will say that I do not support Man City. They're not one of my clubs. But as soon as the ban was first announced, I knew, and I said this, that they would probably get away most likely with it. I did not on this podcast channel, but I did say it in many public forums that I'm a part of. I said that they were not going to be banned, like that ban was going to be taken away once the appeal went through. And I'm usually quite cynical with these things anyway, but I knew that the ban wouldn't stand because of the reasons for which the ban was given in the first place. Quite simply, UEFA knew that Manchester City had breached the rules before and had fined them for it in the past as well. This is quite public record that everyone of you know. What they didn't know, and by they I mean UEFA, what UEFA didn't know was that City had falsified the revenues even more than that. So think about it, where they had said that they had revenues of £100 million, for example, and UEFA found out that they only had revenues of £80 million and the rest wasn't, but actually they only had £50 million. They didn't know that. You see, it's okay to break the rules as long as you tell UEFA about it and pay them a little something on the side. But it's not okay to break it and then lie about it to UEFA. See, that's where UEFA's ego got hurt and they pushed a case against them. Unfortunately, that isn't a valid argument to ban someone, and it doesn't hold up in court, so CAS lifted the ban, which was, the right thing for them to do at that point. This wasn't about City breaking the rules or lying about it, because they did do that. It was about lying to UEFA and making a fool out of them. The easiest indication that I can give to you is that every legal expert agreed that the case wouldn't hold up with CAS. If you read any of the articles by legal experts, or if you heard of any opinions that legal experts had, they all said that this case wouldn't hold up against CAS, the evidence wouldn't hold up, which tells you right from the beginning how doomed it was. Now, however, the wording of the judgment is really important, and there are two aspects that are very important in these. The first one is that the charges weren't established sufficiently, meaning there's lack of evidence, which makes sense because hacked emails and financial records are inadmissible in courts, and the accounts which were obviously well doctored the first time around, they made sure that they were that they could fool them the first time around, so that wasn't really sufficient evidence anyway. And two, they were time barred, which refers probably to the statute of limitations, which is usually 5 years, or that the breaches that were discovered were from earlier than 2013, meaning that they couldn't be investigated. The statute of limitations, by the way, is a quite common rule in many countries in Europe, so that's quite well known. So essentially, if you are a City fan, this verdict doesn't mean that your club didn't break the rules. It's just that they were smart enough to cover their tracks. And if you're not a City fan, you can claim a moral victory, but it really doesn't matter to anyone at this point. And this is not a rant on City or their business practices, because quite frankly, City are not the first club that have tried to buy their way to success. Chelsea did it quite brazenly, Blackburn did it, Leeds tried to do it, even before that there were other clubs that tried to do it, so it's not something new and it's not something unique. That has happened every time. But, if anyone can explain to me how they found the $200 or $300 million to play for Outrage, Fernando, Sinclair, Rodwell, Boateng, Fernandinho, among others, back in 2013 to 2018 period, by just being, having first time won the Premier League, not being a very big club at all outside of England, and by big club I'm not being a big deal outside of England, and having no real major playing assets that they could sell, or making any dodgy sponsorship deals, which they did. I'm all ears. Really, I would love to listen to the theories on that. But anyway, what does this mean for UEFA and FFP in general? I don't think it changes much, to be honest. I know there's been a lot of obituaries written about FFP and about UEFA, but quite frankly, I think that's a little bit overboard. I mean, yes, we know now that clubs can cheat and get away with it, but we knew that before as well. This just kind of makes it out in the open, but we knew that before as well. And by the way, caught or not, using creative accounting practices or registering in tax havens or inflating sponsorship deals, these are all different ways of cheating. No matter which club is doing it, and I'm saying this as a fan of a club that I'm sure does at least one or two of these things. The reality is that FFP, just like VAR, was a great idea in theory, but is extremely complicated to implement in reality. And what's worse is there is one FFP rule for clubs that are participating in European competitions governed by UEFA, like the Champions League and the Europa League, but then there's another one for those in the domestic leagues. And these are governed by each of the leagues themselves, meaning that there are different rules that apply instead of one standardized regulation. I even believe that FFP as an industry-wide rule is not even sustainably applicable, and that if somebody actually challenged in court, it would actually be overturned. And the only reason they don't do it is because I think all the clubs collectively agree to adhere to it rather than it being enforceable by law. But there is some merit to the argument that it limits competition and makes it a closed shop for the big clubs. Though, in all fairness, this has been an issue everywhere except in England for much longer than FFP's introduction. I mean, FFP came out in 2013 or 2012, and by La Liga was already a two-horse race by then. The Bundesliga, okay, fair enough. You had Dortmund winning two league titles back to back before that, but I don't think FFP changed Bayern's domination that came. It just accelerated it maybe, but I don't think that was the cause. PSG had already pretty much monopolized France by that point. Juventus were just about beginning to get a hold of Serie A, but then to be fair, Serie A had its own problems because of the financial crisis with the clubs. So I don't think FFP has it may have accelerated that, but I don't think it was the cause for that. And the only other alternative to FFP is a salary cap. But that wouldn't work either because of the differences in the currencies and also how they would be implemented. I think there's not much else you can do to address the financial imbalance in football. Hopefully UEFA can learn from this incident and they can make FFP rules that much more stringent and have a much more rigorous investigation policy. But that is if they care about helping clubs survive and thrive. Otherwise, well, I say just let's open the floodgates, let the money roll in and not worry about football's future tomorrow. And let whatever happens, because at the end of the day, in England, if you just take England as a microcosm, what is now stopping the Premier League from approving Saudi Arabia's takeover deal? Nothing. What is stopping Saudi Arabia from going out and spending £1 billion on players? Nothing. If City can do it, if the UAE Abu Dhabi backed group can do it, then what grounds does UEFA have to stop Saudi Arabia and to stop Newcastle United? None whatsoever. So those are the only two options here at this point. But at the end of the day, I think one way or another, this is somewhat of a crossroads. This decision is somewhat of a crossroads. But I think people are going a bit overboard with the whole death of FFP. I think this will be an evolution of FFP, one way or another. Whether it becomes more relaxed or whether it becomes more stringent, I think that's kind of what we need to see. But I don't think FFP itself will go away. I think it will just evolve and change into something else. But in other news, Real Madrid did win their 34th La Liga title this past week, beating Villarreal 2-1, which would have been enough on its own, but Barcelona also contrived to lose to Osasuna 2-1, so Madrid had a 7-point lead with just one game to go, which means that mathematically they had secured the title. Now, it's been a strange season in La Liga actually, with neither of the two teams looking like the world beaters of the past decade. I mean, you could say with certainty in the past decade that either Real Madrid or Barcelona were the best teams in the world. Sometimes both of them were the best two teams in the world. But this last season, you couldn't see that. You couldn't even make a case for it, to be honest. And I would hazard to say that this is probably the worst Barcelona side since Martino's time in 2014. But let's start with a completely different team to analyze, who for me were an even bigger disappointment this season, and that's Atletico Madrid. Now, like Borussia Dortmund, who I have discussed in my Bundesliga review episode earlier this month, so check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Plug. But I was hoping for a big season from Atletico as well. They had signed a massive talent in Joao Felix from Benfica, highly rated, signed for £100 million euros plus, by the way, which is not a money that Atletico spend willy nilly, but they spend that for him. And they also signed Kieran Trippier from Spurs, and they still had a few big players like Diego Costa, Saul Niguez, Koke, Partey, Jimenez. And after putting 7 past Real Madrid in a preseason game, I know that we shouldn't make judgments based on preseason, but still, it's hard to overlook that kind of result. I really had the belief that this team could be challengers this season. Unfortunately, despite a few good performances, notably that Champions League tie with Liverpool, they have been pretty poor this season. There's no getting around that, and it might very well be that Simeone's tactics no longer fit with the team, and he hasn't sufficiently evolved to get players like Felix to play at their best, because they still look like a team that prefers 1-0 wins over 3-1s or even 2-1s. He's been playing that way for well over 5 years now, so it's natural for teams to have sussed them out and it not being as effective anymore. And so obviously, it's he's got to evolve his tactics. He's got to change it up because he can't just keep playing the same way and hoping for the same results. On the other hand, I think Felix obviously hasn't replaced Griezmann's goals, which I'm assuming is what he was brought in to do. But he's still young, so maybe he'll be better next season. We can hope for that. Trippier has been very inconsistent, which is always understandable because A, that's Kieran Trippier, and B, he's moving to a new league, a new signing. And with Costa aging, I think Morata couldn't adequately fill the void either. He's been the top scorer for Atletico this season, but with half the number of goals that you would expect Griezmann to score or that he scored in the past few seasons. They lost a big chunk of experience from the defense with Godin leaving, Thiago leaving, even I think I forget the name of the right back, but the right back also left, and so all of these players leaving, and they didn't. What they brought in was very young players, so it was always going to be a shift. But hopefully, that with that season now under the belt, maybe things will be better next season. There have been a few bright lights though. I think Partey does seem like a good replacement for Thiago, if he's going to stay on for another season, which nobody's sure because his release clause is pretty low and there is interest from other clubs. Saul Niguez continues to grow in stature, and he's certainly not going to leave because of the length of his contract. It's quite insane. I think he has like 9 or 10 years left on his contract, by the way. It's got a long contract, and with a very, very big release clause as well. But if Lodi, Trippier, Felix can also make that step up, then I think Atletico can challenge next season. But it remains to be seen. And I think a lot will depend on how Simeone shapes the team. Is he going to evolve? Is he going to stick to what he knows? That I think will be the key. He tried to evolve to a bit more attacking football a couple of seasons ago, 3 seasons ago, and it didn't work out. And so he went back to what he knew. And I think he's been burned by that experience. But I think he needs to perhaps analyze if this team is probably better suited to make that adaptation rather than the previous one. Which brings us to Barcelona. And the only word to describe their season is shambles, because that is what it ultimately was. Let's start at the beginning. They signed Griezmann from Atletico for about 100 million plus euros, their third 100 million plus signing in the last 3 years. And even on paper, that's a very baffling signing because his best position is a second striker. Now, Griezmann, at one point, he was the third best player in the world behind Ronaldo and Messi. That's no exaggeration to say that. But that's been a few years ago. The last few years, he's been consistent, but not quite earth-shattering, not quite spectacular. But even so, his best position is playing as a second striker in a 4-4-2. He's not a winger, he's not a midfielder, and Barcelona don't play 4-4-2 because that formation doesn't suit Messi. So that means he has to play either as a winger or as a midfielder. They can't play him as a midfielder, so they play him as a winger. And needless to say, that's been like having another Philippe Coutinho, because Coutinho was the same. He's more of a midfielder, but they tried to shunt him out on the wing, so he wasn't very good. And same with Griezmann, he put in mediocre performances because he isn't a winger. And so that just completely backfired. That signing was completely unreasonable. I think it was not a very well thought out, a very well planned signing at all. Dembele continued his own unremarkable performances, another one of the 3 100 million plus signings, along with Philippe Coutinho, who I already mentioned. But De Jong had a fairly decent season. Frenkie De Jong, who was signed from Ajax, he was pretty good, but he was injured for a while towards the end. I think he's only just coming back now from injury, but otherwise he had a pretty good this season and maybe something he can build on. The real farce, though, that came off the field. Barcelona were pretty steady under Valverde at the start until the midway point of the season, when they were top of the league, even if they were unconvincing. And to be fair, Valverde is not like a great manager like Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp, but he's pretty good in what he can do, and he's generally steady. If he's not spectacular, he's still steady, and he generally knows how to win the leagues because he won it the last 2 years, so he kind of knows that part of it, even if his teams do implode in the Champions League. Then they came the Super Copa tournament in Saudi Arabia, which was completely, I don't know what that was, why that had to take place in Saudi Arabia, why they had to have 4 teams go there, I have no idea. But in that one, there was a semi final, and Atletico beat Barcelona in that semi final, and then Valverde was sacked. To lose a game in a meaningless tournament, or ultimately meaningless tournament, and I think that was just sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. For some reason, the players lost faith, and well, they let Valverde go, and they brought in Quique Setien, and most likely because Messi had no faith in the manager as well. I should point out, probably that more than the team not having faith. But nonetheless, they brought in Quique Setien, who by all accounts is a wonderful guy, but he does not have the ability or the experience to manage a club that the size of Barcelona is, and with all of the egos that they have. And well, after that, from being top of the league, they slowly lost their lead. They went out of the cup to Athletic Bilbao, and then ultimately they will finish at least 4 points behind Madrid this season. Most likely more than that, probably 7, maybe 10. We'll see how the last game plays out. But it's just baffling to see what happened. The play has been boring to watch. The play is even more uninspiring, and the tactics are from Barcelona's 2010s heyday, which no longer works in the modern games because most teams have now figured out the limitations of that type of play. And which brings me to the final point of focus, that is Messi. Now, there's no denying that Messi is one of the greatest footballers of all time, probably the greatest footballer of his generation, but I'm not going to start a Messi Ronaldo debate here. However, his stature at Barcelona now is equivalent to that of Johan Cruyff, if not bigger than him. And Cruyff is like a deity at Barcelona. If you're not a Barcelona fan, it's hard to understand what Cruyff means to Barcelona, but he's really a huge deal at Barcelona. And that power pretty much means that he can dictate a lot of policies at Barcelona, including the transfer policy, because players are signed based on if they fit with Messi rather than the team. Because in many ways, Messi is the team. It also means that managers can be changed based on who Messi wants, which is probably why Valverde was sacked midway through the season instead of at the end, and why Xavi is being pursued so aggressively, and why Pep is being linked with the move back to Barcelona, though he keeps saying he's going to see out in a year. But anyway, there was also a viral clip that showed Messi ignoring the coach's instructions from a couple of weeks ago, and that might give the impression of a man who knows all too well his position at the club, who probably thinks he's bigger than the club. And so Barcelona right now, I think they are at a crossroads. Messi is still the main man. He is their most creative player, and he's their most lethal goal scorer because he tops the chart on both assists and goals scored. But he is 33 now. And I know a lot of us refuse to accept this, but he is human, and he will decline physically at least as he gets older and older. So should Barcelona continue building the team around him, or should they start looking beyond him for the future? That would be the key question for whoever is elected as the new president of Barcelona. And up until now, no manager or president has even considered that prospect. And for good reason. I mean, no one wants to be remembered as a manager who let Messi go, or as a president who failed to keep Messi, especially after losing Figo and Neymar. That is a real paranoia that is around the place. But is that still such a bad thing now? That's the question. Is that still such a bad thing if Messi were to go? Would the team as a whole perform better and be better if he weren't around? And these are questions that need to be answered. And actually, if I can answer that, I'm not so sure about that. I think Messi still has a very massive role to play at the club, but provided his heart and his head are focused on helping the club improve and the team improve, and is not driven by his own personal ambitions. And that, I think, is the key question. Is Messi's outburst? He pretty much criticized the teammates and he criticized the club. Is that coming from a point of improving the club, or is it coming from a point of personal ambition where he wants the manager to be someone to his liking, where he wants players to his liking, irrespective of whether the club needs them or not? That, I think, is the question that needs to be sorted out. What I do think, however, is that Barcelona need to stop giving him new contracts, because at this stage he's not going to be a long-term game changer anywhere else. He might be a great player for a club for a year or 2 years, but not more than that. And no one's paying his release clause that they've said. I think it's like a 1 billion euros or something like that. It's a very high release clause. Nobody's paying that up. So it's simply there's no need to keep extending his contract, and there's no need to bow down to him, because all it does is simply strengthens his position at the club. Every time they keep giving him a new contract, when he is upset, they keep coming up with a new contract. It just strengthens his position, and it also weakens everyone else's position who's above him, like the manager or the sporting director, the president. So I think that's something that they need to stop doing, is giving him new contracts. And finally, I mean, what was up with the Arthur Pjanic swap deal? I mean, seriously, what the hell? I mean, I know why they did it. They did it to balance the books using some creative accounting methods. But seriously, how bad of a financial mess are Barcelona in to even have to consider, let alone sanction, such a deal? For those of you who don't know, the deal was basically Barcelona sell Arthur, who is 23 and a very promising midfielder, to Juventus in exchange for Miralem Pjanic, who is a very good midfielder, no doubt about it, but is 30 years old, hasn't quite set the world alight, but nonetheless, and plus 10 million euros that Juventus paid. The total value, I think, of it was 70 million euros, but 10 million euros was Pjanic for Arthur. But I mean, it's not the kind of deal that you would expect Barcelona to do. So I mean, I don't know what was up with that. But thankfully, Barcelona do have some decent young players like Puig, Fati, Todibo, Lenglet, who's still quite kind of young, plus Frankie de Jong, who I spoke about. So they have something to build a team around, but a summer rebuild will be very difficult based on what I'm seeing right now financially. I think that will be very difficult unless they can move players like Coutinho on, because I don't think they have the money for really big transfers. But unexpectedly, the best team in the league has been Real Madrid this season, at least for me. And I feared the worst after watching them let in 7 from Atletico last summer, but what a turnaround. They were not perfect this season, far from it, but they have shown the value of having battle-hardened players who have been here before, done that before, they have that experience and knew to just get through the games and to just win. That, at the end of the day, that is what was mattered. They knew how to get through games and win them. And I know some people will point to VAR conspiracies, refereeing favoritism, but at the end of the day, they have been better than the competition. That's simple as that. Dodgy decisions, every big club gets them. VAR things, I am firmly of the belief that they even themselves out of the course of the season. I'm pretty sure that's the case as well here. I know some fans, and it's tribalism at some point as well, where fans saying, oh no, this is Stonewall decision, that was not a Stonewall decision. But anyway, the most important factor than either of those above was actually the lockdown break. Because having that rest for a few months and then playing the remaining 10 games back to back like a cup tournament was perfect for this team, because they are largely cup specialists. Ramos has had an incredible season, mostly in front of goal, rather than protecting his own goal, which is what he's supposed to do as a defender. But nonetheless, kudos to him. Incredible player, incredible personality. I think words can't describe what he's achieved this season. And I think Valverde is going to be a huge star. I think he held that midfield together for a long time in the early part of the season. I think he's going to be a big star for Madrid, as is Rodrigo. I think those two really are going to be the future. And also hats off to Modric, Kroos, Isco, Varane, even Nacho, the old guard, plus Mendy, who's a new signing. This old guard, they led from the front as senior pros at the club, and they showed the rest how it's done. Like, they were the ones who led by example. And on that note, I think a big mention for Karim Benzema. The fun fact here, he was a player who, when he was at Lyon during 2007 to 2009, he would always be the first player I'd buy for my club when I was playing career mode in FIFA, because he was so good and he had so much potential. So when he moved to Madrid, I think he went under the radar a little bit because of Ronaldo and then Bale. And I remember once he went to Madrid, I never actually bought him for my club after that. But I always thought that he made the wrong move at that time, like choosing to go to Madrid instead of Manchester United. Because I think if he had gone to Manchester United, he might have become a bigger player, because he would have had that responsibility, especially with Ronaldo leaving at that time and Rooney kind of still making his name. I think he would have been a much bigger player than he would have if he went to Madrid. But then, although he's won 4 Champions League titles and he's won 3 league titles, I don't think he would have won that at Manchester United. So, I think career-wise, I think he probably made the right move, if not, for personal ambition. But all that being said, I think this season he's shown exactly what he was capable of, always. And has been pretty much the star of the show for Real Madrid from start to finish, Ramos accepted. An incredible form, brilliant play, and dare I say it, I think he is the best striker in Europe right now, at least since the Bundesliga is done for the season. I think right now there's not a striker better than Karim Benzema. Anyway, big shout out to Zidane as well. He's totally turned it around from last season's no-hopers and throat scrapers to absolute champions this season. 10 straight victories since lockdown, in which they have never trailed. I think that is an incredible statistic. And I know a lot of people think he got lucky in the past, but he has shown a lot of tactical flexibility this season, playing 4-3-3, 4-4-2, 4-5-1. He's made a lot of big decisions that have paid off, and he's already ushering in a new generation of players like Valverde, Rodrigo, Renier, Vinicius, plus they still have Odegaard, Brahim Diaz, and Veguillon all waiting in the wings. So I think that the present and the future is bright for Real Madrid. Seriously, they're brilliant. And that will be the next crucial phase though, because this title was won with the older heads stepping up and proving their experience, but they're going to be a year older next year. So how will their bodies hold up? And easing that next generation in while still winning trophies is a very, very hard balance to strike, probably the hardest in management, but it has to be done. And Madrid have to now start thinking about the next generation. But I think Zidane is the man who can do it. I definitely, I think Madridistas will have full faith in him. They also need to decide on the future of Bale and James Rodriguez, and by that I mean they need to find a way to sell them, because Zidane certainly doesn't see any contributions from them at this point. I mean, if you have 9 substitutes, you can make 5 subs in a game, and you still don't put Bale on. I think it clearly sends a message of how important he is to the team at this point. And another factor will also be Eden Hazard. And if this season was just a blip, or if his fitness issues are something more long term, I think that is something that would be a key storyline as well. But it's interesting how both Hazard and Griezmann cost 100 million plus euros for both their clubs, and both of them were flops. And yet how much easier the next couple of months will be for one because of the trophy won. So fine margins, right, as they say in football. Of course, the season isn't over for either of the 3 teams that I mentioned. I think Atletico are in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. They're playing Leipzig, which is quite evenly matched, and they could very well go through in that one, I think, and get to the semi-finals. Barcelona have a second leg at the Camp Nou against Napoli to come in the round of 16, where it's evenly poised 1-1, and both teams are having lackluster runs at the moment. I'd back Barca to come out of that one, but after that it's most likely going to be Bayern Munich, and that will be very, very tough to crack, because Bayern, I think, are one of the favourites for the Champions League. Finally, for Real Madrid, they are playing Manchester City, where they are 2-1 down, playing away from home, and they have Ramos suspended. So it's going to be a tall order, and even with their own brilliant form and City's sluggish performance, I can't see any way through for them, unfortunately. But I think it will still be considered a good season even if they don't make it through to the quarterfinals. I don't think anybody can be complaining. So finally, the one benefit of lockdown was that we didn't have to see the planned overseas games in the United States that Tebas was alluding to. And the fact that a big club that was open to it was Barcelona, who are in all kinds of financial trouble, says a lot, along with the statement that they made that they were only willing to play an away game, not one scheduled for the Nou Camp. So, I mean, take that for what it is. It's really pretty much just a cash grab for all the clubs, really, but that's what it is. But I think the current situation will prevent such a game from happening for at least the next 2 years, though I'm sure Tebas will be itching to get there even sooner if he can, but hopefully that won't happen. Overall, though, congratulations to Real Madrid and their fans on winning the 34th league title. Commiserations to Barcelona, but better luck next time. And hopefully some other teams will also improve enough to provide some competition next season. But I won't hold my breath on that based on the last decade. That's it for me, guys. Take care and stay safe. See you again next week. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to that episode of Late Night Football. We need your help to grow this channel, so if you've been enjoying the show thus far, please do like and subscribe to this channel and share it with your friends, family, colleagues, neighbors, drinking buddies, fellow football fans, and anybody else you know or don't know. We'd really appreciate it. Please also follow us on Twitter and Facebook via the links in the description below, and spread the word about us. Take care.